it is Jazz here today. I'm doing another series of 5 book reviews. I'm going to tell you first what 5 books I'm going to be reviewing, and I will leave the links to the time codes below in the description in case you just want to check out specific books. But also, if you could watch the whole entire video, my watch minutes would love that. Today, I will be reviewing Black Beauty by Anna Swell, Making Bombs for Hitler by, I don't even want to try to pronounce this poor author's name. I'm just going to butcher it. The Deep by Rivers Solomon, Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer, and About a Boy by Nick Hornby. First up, we have Black Beauty. This is a memoir of the horse called Black Beauty. This is truly an intriguing read, just solely because of the fact that it is written from an animal perspective. I don't know that I was prepared to read a book from the perspective of a horse. It did make me think about how we treat animals as humans and how important it is to take care of the creatures in your life and just creatures and wildlife in general. They do sort of have feelings, I guess, or it makes you think about whether they have feelings or not, I guess. I personally think they do. I felt like I learned a lot about horse training and different aspects of that, especially at the time period when this book is set. This is a very relaxing and enjoyable book. I will say that I don't think I connected to it entirely just because of the perspective, but I do think it's an important book to kind of make you think, and I do think that it's a good classic book to check out if you're just looking for something a little different. I did check this out in audiobook through LibriVox. If you don't know what LibriVox is, it is an app, or I think you can also use their website. And basically, they have volunteers read books like this one that are in the public domain, and you can get them for free because they're volunteer read, although they do sell some audiobooks on there as well. There were 2 volunteer read versions of this. One is a group read, which means they have several different people reading each chapter. The other one is just read by one person. I went with the one read by one person solely because sometimes those group reads, you get one good reader, you get some not so good readers, but also the sound kind of differs because they're recording it themselves, whereas one reader, obviously it's like a reader that you know you already like, you get it for the whole thing, and then also the sound balance is pretty even throughout it. I will link you to the one that I listened to in the description because it is on YouTube. So if you do want to check that out, do that. But I would say if you're somebody that likes to speed up your audiobooks, you might want to find it on the LibriVox app, because that way on the app you can speed up your audiobook if you need to. I gave Black Beauty 4 stars. I would definitely read it again if the mood struck me, and I would recommend it. Next book is Making Bombs for Hitler. This is part of what is called the WW2 series. I believe that these books are anthology books, so this might be the second one that was published, but all of these books are within a same sort of group of ideas, but they can definitely be read separately in whatever order. This is a historical fiction book. It is centered around the topic of the fact that Ukrainian children in World War II were often kidnapped from their homes and their families and basically taken by the Nazis to work in work camps. The book centers around the main character, Lita, who is one of these children that has been kidnapped. She, in the work camp, is assigned to make bombs for the Nazis, and because she doesn't really want to help the Nazis out, her and the group she's working with try to sabotage the bombs. My favorite thing about this book is that I learned something new. This is an element of World War II that I hadn't really learned about, and it made me want to do some research on this subject and all those things, and I definitely would like to check out the other books in the series because I would like to just learn more through the fiction through these stories, and I quite enjoyed this story just on its own as a story, not even just from the historical perspective. Now, while this book is, of course, dark because obviously truly terrible things are happening to Lita as well as to the people around her, and it is not described super, super graphically, but it's described enough so that you get how truly horrible it was. I will say that there is a lot of hope to this story. I do think it was very nice that the author made sure to bring that in. There are some wonderful friendships that Lita develops, and there is a strength to the character in how she keeps pushing through, keeps going, and all of that is so wonderful, and it definitely balances out all the dark parts of the story. I thought this book was just great. I think it was really wonderfully done. I think it's a book that, while it's geared probably towards a certain age group, I think any age group could enjoy it. I definitely want to read, like I said, more books in the series because I did really enjoy the author's writing. And I think if you're somebody that is jumping into historical fiction or likes historical fiction or just wants to learn something new about World War II, I definitely would recommend this book. So I gave this book 5 stars. Then we have The Deep. This book is centered around a mythology in which the African slave women that were pregnant were thrown overboard out of the slave ships, and out of that there were birthed a group of creatures that were sort of mermaid-like, merman-like. Because the memories of how these mer people were created are so traumatic, only one person in the group is the one that holds these memories all the time, and once every year, I believe, or after a certain span of time, the person that has these memories will give the memories to everyone and then take them back into themselves. The main character in this book, Yetu, is one of those such people. And because that is such a traumatic experience all the time, she basically gives the memories away to the other people in her group and then runs away instead of taking these memories back in. And interesting things happen for both her and the people affected by that. This is one of those books where it definitely disappointed me just a little bit. And that's because it has so much potential to be this really great book, but a lot of the execution moments fell through for me. Now, I do think that the concept is really interesting, and I think it's a really great concept. I also think that a lot of the world building moments were very well done, and I do think the writing style is a very pretty writing style to read. However, in terms of the actual structure of the story, I don't think that it was focused enough. First of all, I don't think it focused on that generational memory aspect as much as I wanted it to, and I think that was the real intent of the story, and I feel like it should have been the real intent, but I feel like the book covered more topics than it really needed to or should have. My main problem with it is that it got super repetitive after about the middle of the story. As I started to get near to the end of the book, I felt like because it did become a little tedious, I lost interest in the last few chapters and just wanted to scan and finish the thing. And I think that's really a shame because I think this could have been a really profound book, and because of the execution and because it was so repetitive, it just didn't follow through. I gave this book 3 stars. For me, it was just an okay read. Yay, it's time to review Midnight Sun. So Midnight Sun, if you don't know, is the perspective of Edward version of Twilight. So if you know Twilight, vampire meets girl, girl is not afraid of him, and vampire and girl fall in love, and there's drama. We all kind of know vaguely what Twilight's about, right? Twilight gets so much hate, and to a certain extent, I understand why, but I have always really enjoyed the books of Twilight. I do not like the movies. I do not think they're well executed. And I also think that sometimes people take the Twilight books a little too seriously. They're supposed to just be fun. They're not trying to be intellectual. They're not trying to say anything. They're just fun books, in my opinion. And I also find them somewhat humorous. I think the characters, if you read them in a certain way, can be quite humorous and quite entertaining and have like a really dry humor that I really enjoy. And I don't know, everybody looks at me crazy when I say this. If you also think this about Twilight, please tell me you agree, because everybody, when I say Twilight characters are funny, looks at me like I'm mentally insane. In terms of Midnight Sun, I, like every Twilight fan, waited for a small eternity for it. I'm super excited to have it, even though I low-key do not love the book cover. I get the pomegranate reference to Hades from Persephone, and I get totally why it's used, because that is how Edward would think of him and Bella. But I just wish the pomegranate was like better looking. But I'm not reviewing the book cover. I'm reviewing the book, and I quite enjoyed the book, but I do have to put it down because it's heavy. Actually, if I was given a choice between Twilight and Midnight Sun, I think that Midnight Sun might be the better book. It could just be that it's written later, but I honestly think that Edward's perspective is the more interesting perspective in this story. I learn a lot more about Bella and her personality, and I think her personality is more intriguing because Bella is more interesting to Edward. In Twilight, I think Bella doesn't find herself very interesting, so she doesn't really say much about herself, and you don't really learn as much about Bella. For example, some of the scenes where Bella and Edward are asking questions about each other, you really only get Edward's answers to Bella's questions in Twilight. She's just going to breeze over the questions he asked her and what she said because she already knows what she thinks of herself. However, in Midnight Sun, you're getting the opposite. You're getting the answers to Edward's questions about Bella. And I learned so much about Bella, and I actually didn't realize that Bella and I had so much in common. For example, like he asked her where would she travel if she could travel anywhere, and she said Prince Edward Island. I was like, yes, I also am an Anne of Green Gables fan that wants to go to Prince Edward Island. She listed several movies that I also really enjoy as her favorite movies, including Somewhere in Time, which is so weird. So it really gave me a lot of insight into Bella's personality, but it also showed me that I have a heck of a ton in common with Bella, and I just didn't even know it. Hello, it is Editing Jazz. I wanted to say this one comment because this is something that I found particularly funny about Midnight Sun, and it's the fact that Edward 100% knows that he is being a weird, creepy, like semi-stalker kind of dude. He's like, why am I a weirdo? I don't understand. I know that shouldn't be funny, but the thing is that I have consumed a lot of vampire stuff in my life. A lot of TV shows, a lot of movies, a lot of books, and I just wanted to like read it and answer back to Edward, honey, like you're all like that. Like, all vampire boyfriends are like that. That's what vampire boyfriends do. At least Edward's aware of it, which cannot be said for some other vampire boyfriends. Also, I would say, in comparison with some of these vampire dudes, Edward's kind of a saint. At least he's aware of his creepiness, and that kind of gave me a giggle. And maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe I just have a weird sense of humor. I don't know. The other thing that makes Midnight Sun a little bit more exciting to me is that you are getting a lot of the chases and the action parts of the story that you don't get to see, because it's basically a choice between Bella sitting in a car being sad and Edward chasing down another vampire. Which one of these sounds more exciting? There's the car chase in it. There's just a lot more action. I also learned a lot about the Cullen family and their dynamics. In some ways, it really changes your perspective on some of the characters. We can't hold vampire or non-human characters to human standards. And I definitely think that comes through in this story. But it's also interesting to see how the characters change, and I learned also so much about certain side characters that you just didn't get to really hear about in the Twilight books. I can't really speak on discrepancies. I buddy read it with my friend AJ over at A Stitch in Time, and she did say that there were some inconsistencies between the two stories. And even though I had reread Twilight, I think last year, it was like at the beginning of last year, so I couldn't remember exact, event discrepancies, but I didn't personally see those, but maybe somebody else did. I'm basically going to rate it 5 stars, but it's mostly because of fun. I do think that Stephenie Meyer's greatest book out of all the books she's written is probably The Host, and it's probably not as great as The Host, but I had a great time with it. And now we have the last book, which is about a boy. This is a dramedy geared book. There's a little drama, there's a little comedy, and it centers around 2 characters. One is a man named Will. He's kind of in his late 30s, early 40s, but he acts a little bit like a teenage child. He never really had to work, so he always kind of lives his life a little emotionally stunted in terms of his behavior. The other character involved in the story is a 12-year-old boy named Marcus, who sort of is forced to behave a little bit like an adult because he is living in a situation where his parents are divorced and his mom has a lot of issues with depression. So he really feels like he needs to take on a mantle and act like a grown-up all the time. Through a series of circumstances, these 2 characters meet, and basically Will learns how to be an adult from Marcus, and Marcus learns how to be a kid from Will. Now, before reading this, I had seen the film adaptation of it, and there are a few differences between the book and the film adaptation, but the general theme is the same, and a lot of the instances are the same, so I enjoyed them equally as much. I do think there are some aspects of the characters that you obviously get through reading from their perspective in the book. So if you want some additional info on the characters or some different ideas about where they think and where their brains are at, definitely still worth checking out the book, even if you've already seen the movie like me. My favorite thing about Nick Hornby so far, because I've read this book and his other book, A Long Way Down, is that he's really able to cover deep topics, possibly triggering topics such as depression and things like that, without making it sad. Basically, it's not to say that he doesn't take these topics seriously, because I do think they are seriously explored, but it's definitely a feeling that I think is human. I think a lot of people do feel the need to kind of be sad, but also laugh at the tragedy. And so there'll be something that happens that balances out that discussion of something that's really serious. And I think it's a really good way to break the ice and be able to discuss something that really does need to be discussed without making it a super triggering experience. I also like that these books have a strong element of situational comedy, which is my favorite comedy, and I like that the instances that the characters find themselves in are so clever, and I also like the relationship that is developed between Will and Marcus and how they are 2 sides of the same coin. I guess I sort of realized that when watching the movie, but I feel like that element really came through even more in the book, so I really appreciated that aspect to their friendship. Did listen to this in audiobook, and I would recommend the audiobook. It's extremely well read. Also, in terms of some of the comedic aspects of this story, I do think that it really comes through a listen. I gave this book 5 stars as well. Those were my 5 book reviews for today. Drop me a comment below if you have any thoughts on any of these books or just to say hi. And that is it, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all soon. Bye!